Now, on a similar subject to liberal institutionalism, let's talk about one particular liberal who I really wish would disappear from the institution. Here we go. Kamala Harris is running for president again. I can't deal, dude. Axios is my favorite news outlet for talking shit about the Democrats because their bias is mostly readable. Yeah, she needs to the extent that like a primary race happens, she needs to get whooped so bad that she cannot come back to politics. Like, I think that like at this point, people might hate Kamala Harris more than Hillary Clinton, and for good reason. The difference is, for whatever reason, the K-Hive still exists. Like, there's still a very small fan base of like Kamala Harris people who really like her despite her complete incompetence, lack of charisma, and abject sociopathy that led her to correctly call Republicans fascist on the campaign trail, and then in like the aftermath just saying, by the way, all that stuff about how Republicans hate democracy and are fascists and whatever, I didn't believe any of that. I was lying. One of the most detestable people in politics today. Even I think Trump has enough of a personality to not be as detestable as Kamala Harris. And Trump is a pedophile. Didn't she go into a tour saying, this is all your fault? Yes, Kamala Harris did the opposite of an apology tour. She wrote a book called like 107 Days or something. Shit ass book. I have no intention to read it. She blames literally everybody else except for herself. Thing she has in common, by the way, with a lot of the Democratic Party autopsies that were done after that election, they were like, yeah, so what went wrong? Ignoring all the things that went wrong. So like they specifically discounted, yeah, all the stuff that like we did wrong, and we didn't have an affirmative plan, whatever. We dropped all the effective rhetoric and alienated the left from our campaign. Yeah. Aside from that, what did we do wrong? Like, they weren't interested in actually reflecting on that. Of course, Kamala Harris, one of the things that she's known for saying on this anti-apology tour was, you all should have just voted for me. No, absolutely no degree of reflection on any of the things that occurred during her campaign. Like, absolute garbage human being with no respect for any of the people that work with her, work for her, or tried to get her elected. I'm qualified to say this uniquely because I was one such person. I was a volunteer on the ill-fated Kamala Harris campaign in 2024. I volunteered with a phone banking group doing tech support during the 2024 campaign. And one of my frustrations as the campaign went on, I started enthusiastic and became very much less so over time, because of like how much Kamala Harris just put a muzzle on Tim Walz, the only good thing about that campaign. I expressed at various points that, like, guys, it really seems like, or I expressed at the end because I wanted to like keep a tight ship for most of it. Like, guys, it really seems like we were trying to push the Democrats across the finish line despite all of their best efforts. They wanted to lose, and we were trying to make them win against their own will. You know, shit. You guys remember, germane to what I was saying earlier, how much Palestine is in the news, how much people talk about Palestine because there's a genocide happening over there right now, right? Obviously, people are going to talk about it. It's being live streamed in real time. Children being shot, burned, blown up. You know, how could you not? You know, I remember this being talked about in 2024, particularly after the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, where they did not allow Palestinians in the building or pro-Palestinian protesters. Straight up, they did not. They barred an entire ethnic group and like political advocacy for the rights of that ethnic group from coming into the building. The Democrats knew that Palestine was a massive political liability for them insofar as they were willing to just let Israel do whatever they want, right? So what do they do about this? They could address the problem and say, look, we support a ceasefire and we will make sure Israel holds up on that. Put some scrutiny on Israel for once. Bare minimum, by the way. Absolute bare minimum. A much more politically feasible thing would be like, yeah, the government of Israel shall know legal hell. They're all going to The Hague. There will be a one-state solution. You will have a secular society. No ifs, ands, or buts. They could have done something like that, something in that range of things. Instead, what they did was they just completely removed all mention of Palestine from anywhere people could provide feedback for them. Even though I was tech support on these phone calls, on these phone banks, we saw scripts. Like when you do phone banking in politics, it is a little bit like sales, except the greatest part is you're not asking people for money. You're asking people for votes and political support. You're trying to convince them of something rhetorically. And it really helps if it's something you believe in, right? And I started to notice like, oh yeah, people are really concerned about Gaza and the genocide that's going on over there. And this was part of like, there were certain categories that people could say like, oh yeah, these are like my main political concerns. There's an opportunity for you to ask like, hey, so what do you care about? Like, what are things you care about a lot? One of those things was Gaza. Post DNC, I remember this. They removed Gaza and Palestine as an option for something that people could respond that they cared about. So like if you're on the phone bank and somebody answers that question, you click that, which provides further like information on like basically what your line could be for like, oh well, if you care about this, then this candidate supports blah blah blah, right? And one of those was like Palestine and Gaza. They removed the option for you to indicate that people cared about Palestine and Gaza from their campaigning materials. Yeah, that like what the one place that like a almost market-esque decentralized method of gathering information works to tell them something critically important. They're like, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. Stop talking about that. Stop talking about that. And of course, meanwhile, like this is a political layup. You had the Republicans out there saying, yeah, we should just kill them all. Just let Israel do whatever they want. They're God's chosen people. The state of Israel has the right to exist as an ethno-state. Palestinians are subhuman. They should just nuke Palestine. That's what the Republicans were saying at this time, with the sole exception of nuke Palestine, because that would require them to admit that Israel has nukes. Anyways, I have crashed out on how evil this fucking woman is. Now let me get into this article that I brought up, but actually just have not read a word of yet. Sorry, I've put that off for long enough. Los Angeles. Kamala Harris isn't planning to go gentle into that good night. Except she literally did this. She said, good night, y'all, at the end of her campaign. And that was it. She did, in fact, do this. This week, the former vice president made clear to potential 2028 rivals that she's working to keep another White House campaign viable. I think she was even in talks with the Democratic Party and leadership about this, and she's already getting like some information from them, like insider information with regards to like political campaigning, which indicates that the Democratic Party intends to crush their cock and balls with a rock again, the same way they did last time. Yeah, the new special move, historical revisionism in parentheses derogatory, Despite worries from party leaders and donors that she can't win, well-founded to the extent that they, worry about this, Harris remains at or near the top of most 2028 Democratic primary polls. The reason for this being that the Democratic Party has done no work to elevate any sort of contrary political vision or candidate to Kamala Harris since. They've like actively quashed opposition. Look how they treated Mamdani. Look how they treated Katie Wilson and Omar Fateh. These local progressive socialist populists who are clearly capturing the attention of the party base, the left wing in America. And the Democrats are actively trying to say, nope, no, don't go to those people. Don't go to those people. Come back to the same corporate centrist slop over and over again. That is all we are willing to provide you. Yeah, he had to fight against his own party. his own party supported Andrew Cuomo. And funnily enough, so did the Republicans. Curtis Sliwa was the Republican candidate. Zohran Mamdani was the Democratic candidate. Andrew Cuomo was the independent candidate. The Democratic and Republican parties both did not support their own nominees and instead supported the independent because the independent was more compatible with centrist corporate slop than either Sliwa or Mamdani. It doesn't even need to be socialism that they're joining forces against. They'll do that. They'll just join forces against anybody who wants to do something good. A lot of the stuff that Zohran Mamdani was advocating for, sure, you could say it's like potentially motivated by an objective of eventually doing some socialist things or moving towards socialism, but a lot of those are just social democracy, like basic shit, you know? Which speaks to how dire of a situation that America is in, that socialists can be considered radical populists who want to transform this country for the better, and their political platform is something that would have been considered like bog standard 100 years ago. Anyways, Harris also has strong support among black voters, the most critical voting bloc in most recent Democratic presidential primaries. Fuck you, Axios, for perpetuating this narrative that the way that you do politics is by like dividing and conquering like demographic groups. Like, oh yeah, what is she campaigning for? I don't know, but she's campaigning to these people. Not for anything, but to these people. It also dehumanizes people a lot. And I'm no stranger to saying that the American people are fucking dumb, that people are stupid, and they will do what they're told by broader media narratives, right? But I think that's actually the opposite of dehumanizing. I think that's just me recognizing very basic human traits that we all share, that I'm subject to myself. We are all influenced by the circumstances under which we live. Our views of the world are influenced by the media, the narratives, and the circumstances that we are exposed to or told about, right? Democrats literally don't recognize this. They're like, well, the black voters like her. Even though Axios is like a center-right news outlet. After lying low the first part of the year and then embarking on a 2024 focused book tour, Harris made several moves this week that many Democrats see as the beginnings of a 2028 campaign. Her book tour expanded. Harris announced many more stops on her tour to promote 107 Days, her story of her short presidential campaign last year. Tour stops in early 2026 will include the historically critical primary state of South Carolina and cities with many black voters, including Detroit, Jackson, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, and Montgomery, Alabama. So yeah, these are like all the areas that are relevant in presidential primary elections. She appeared before the Democratic National Committee. Harris and her husband, Doug Emhoff, mingled with the National Party officials and state party chairs in Los Angeles this week during the DNC's winter meeting. At a reception Wednesday evening, DNC chair Ken Martin, the guy who cried, by the way, after being bullied by his younger progressive co-chair and then resulted in said co-chair being fired. Like the younger co-chair, when I say quote unquote bullied, is the lightest fucking touch imaginable. You know, David Hogg said, yeah, we need to be okay with primarying Democrats that don't do anything and replace them with Democrats that are much more politically active and ambitious, because like otherwise the party will die. And Ken Martin fucking cried on audio. Introduced Emhoff as a former second gentleman and quipped that he could be the future first gentleman. People heard the remarks told Axios. Harris is rolling out new rhetoric. New probably being in air quotes. She railed against both parties in the status quo in a speech Friday to Democratic officials. Okay, this would actually be new for her because she's the status quo basically personified. Many in the room told Axios they were struck by how different Harris' remarks were from her Biden defending message on the campaign trail last year. I would bet money that she did not directly criticize Joe Biden in doing this. because for whatever reason, the Democratic Party has this really, really bizarre internal legacy culture. You're not allowed to criticize Obama. You're not allowed to criticize Joe Biden. You're not allowed to criticize Hillary Clinton even. You're not allowed to criticize a lot of party insiders that have built the party in its modern state, whether that be good or bad, in parentheses, mostly bad, you know? Like shit, they probably would tolerate you breaking from FDR way more than they would tolerate you breaking from Obama. Like you could criticize things that FDR did, and the Democratic Party would be more willing to stomach you than if you criticize something that Obama, Biden, or Clinton did, like Bill Clinton, or that Hillary Clinton advocated for or said or whatever, you know? Anyways, both parties have failed to hold the public's trust, Harris said. Government is viewed as fundamentally unable to meet the needs of its people. People are done with the status quo and they're ready to break things to force change. That's great. Would you care to actually say anything? Nobody like falls for this, by the way. Unless they're consultants, in which case they're like, oh, great, keep saying this exact thing and don't elaborate any further. After this speech, some committee members told Axios they want Harris to run in 2028. And that when Harris mentioned the future during her speech, someone shouted, you. Okay, 50-50 chance, K-Hive or paid? Harris spokesperson Kirsten Allen said Harris will approach 2026 with the same commitment that anchored 2025, so nothing. Listening to the American people, reflecting where leadership has fallen short, and helping shape the path forward beyond this political moment. So blaming Americans for not supporting her hard enough. Gotcha. Allen added that includes supporting efforts to win Democratic majorities in the House and Senate. Okay. I was going to say, buddy, if she wants to do that, the best thing she can do is never endorse anybody, because her endorsement will be toxic. Very, very toxic, especially given that the Democratic Party needs the help of a younger, much more left-leaning political base to remain relevant. And Kamala Harris is antithetical to that. But the Democrats are paid opposition. They are controlled opposition, rather, maybe not directly paid, but controlled opposition by the same interests that control both the Democratic and Republican parties, the interests of capital, right? And I have semi-jokingly, offered that the Democrats are going to have to work extra hard to lose the 2026 elections, because the Democrats work really hard in order to lose, This would be a component part of that. I could see a path where the Democrats lose in 2026. They make only very disappointing, moderate to mild gains. And that world includes Kamala Harris going around and endorsing everybody to ensure that people know that the Democratic Party is still the party of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton and so on and so forth. Harris also spoke Thursday night at the annual gala for the United Farm Workers and received enthusiastic applause. UFW President Teresa Romero told Axios rank-and-file UFW members from towns like Bakersfield, Salinas, Oxnard, and Modesto were excited to see her and know she's still fighting for them. Sprinkling in some great, catering to rural America, too. Again, the, obsession with rural American identity when all of American culture comes from the cities for the most part. And this, the endorsement of unions here doesn't mean that much to me, because unions have been, we've seen unions go in various different sorts of directions in doing things that they believe are in the best interest of their members, but ultimately screw the whole country over even further. Like how the United Auto Workers were very positive on Trump's tariffs because of I don't know, something about outsourcing automobile manufacturing or something like that. A lot of the unions, when push comes to shove, because of their connection to business, because unions are a part of the businesses at which they work and their fate is sort of tied to that, they can go on kind of a Nosball streak sometimes. When they think of cities, they think of minorities. Yeah, that's true. You're supposed to, this is how they say, see guys, we're catering to the white supremacists too, or something like that. Several early polls Oh, wait, no, I'm still on this one. Okay. Other potential 2028 Democratic candidates were also in LA this week, but didn't speak at the full DNC meeting. California Governor Gavin Newsom stormed through on Thursday and met with several committee members and Martin. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker headlined a DNC fundraiser in LA that raised more than $1 million, but he didn't make the rounds of the nearby DNC meeting, surprising some party officials. I don't know what Pritzker's game is. I want to like him, but I feel like he's a little bit compromised by the institutional Democratic Party. I want to believe that he could become an FDR-esque figure, but it would take him breaking from the party more and supporting some much more robust social democratic reforms regarding things like housing and publicly owned grocery stores and commissaries and like public transit and Medicare for all and things like that. But there's a vision potentially. I wouldn't count on it, but there's a vision. Newsom is just a psycho. Several early polls have shown Newsom as a top contender for the 2028 nomination, but Morning Consult has consistently found Harris leading. Again, because the Democrats are terminally unwilling to consider that anybody else could be a good, candidate. Their surveys have also shown Harris narrowly outperforming Newsom against Vance. Yeah. Two recent polls of the traditionally important state of New Hampshire found Harris trailing Newsom and former Transport Secretary Pete Buttigieg. If they run Pete Buttigieg, if they run Harris or Newsom or Buttigieg, that is the death of the party. Yeah, it's like the Democratic Party has decided one of these people is going to be the next president, and that's final. We are not taking input or feedback from our own political base and party membership. Party membership in the United States works differently than in other countries. In other countries, you have to pay dues and have a card to be a member of a party. In the United States, when you register to vote, you register as either Democrat, Republican, or Independent, and that affects which internal elections you get to vote in. But there's no dues. There's no there's no local party meetings. Parties just don't have a social presence at the local level in America. So they're to begin with, they're already much more disconnected from their political base, but still just as reliant on them for political support. And the Democrats are, again, they're just ideologically unwilling to recognize that there is still a democratic logic that underpins elections in this country. That is, you have to campaign. You have to appeal to people on issues that, affect them. And that's not to say just have an epic policy platform, Lamau. No, you have to be a populist. You have to know how to sell that to people. And even when the Democrats sometimes have that, they are so willing to just cave and not sell it at all. Yeah, they think of people as sheep that they need to herd into the flock in order to maintain power. Unironically, Republicans view their voter base as much more human than the Democrats do, because the Republicans are willing to effectively the Republicans turn the racism dial and look back to their audience for approval, right? Because they recognize they need the approval for the audience for that to keep working. The Democrats are turning up the fucking neoliberal slop dial and not once looking back at the audience. And actively ignore them when they start shouting. Thank you, Axios. National polls of presidential primaries, especially more than 2 years out, make for good cocktail party debates, but not much else. Thank you. Appropriately dismissive of the Democratic Party, if I don't say so myself, at least at the end. Yeah, and then they realize that everybody hits and they're like, what's wrong with you guys? All I did was turn on the enshittification machine because Republicans asked me to. I don't know what you're so mad about. Type shit. This country's full of narcissists who don't believe anything. That, like, our political system fucking optimizes for narcissistic dipshits that believe nothing. You really act like the noble system? Not even. In feudalism, in the feudal system, there was such a thing as noblesse oblige. This was a pretty consistent governing logic. Even though there was a massive degree of exploitation and, like, extraction that occurred, like the nobles taking their cut as rent that they did not earn, that they did not work for, from the peasantry, right? There was a sort of ideological through line of noblesse oblige, that the peasants work the land, and as a good member of the nobility, to be morally noble. Like, there's a reason we describe intentions as noble, because of the ideology of the noblesse oblige, where it's like, oh yeah, we should provide protection to these peasants. We should ensure that all these settlements are getting food distributed to them in sufficient quantities if they're not like farming settlements. We should make sure that they're not like being crushed by these rents necessarily. You know, that's not to say they all followed through on that, but it was sort of like it was an ideological guideline that was commonly referred to, especially in justifying why the nobles were in the position that they were in, because one of their core things was like, yeah, part of what makes us who we are is that we're supposed to care about the fate of the peasantry, because we recognize that, like, they constitute the working force of the country and they support us in our position, you know? Democrats and modern liberals and modern fascists to an extent as well, because fascists nowadays are just liberals but worse, are so up their own ass that they just don't care. They'll destroy an entire country. They're literally like, and I'm not exaggerating either, there have been measles outbreaks in America. Measles, I was born in the year that measles was declared extinct. No more measles. They have measles vaccines, MMR vaccines. I got mine as a kid. Several diseases that were considered extinct when I was born and was vaccinated against them are having outbreaks today because fascists are destroying the institutions that are responsible for public health, and liberals have no interest in stopping them. There is nothing comparable to the noblesse oblige in this country, and that is not me saying that we need to bring back the feudal system and the noblesse oblige, because the feudal system was not a good system. You know, nobles were completely unaccountable. But what I am saying is that this system also sucks and is being crushed by the weight of its own contradictions. This is a product of the ideological individualism that is inherent to liberalism. There is such a thing as, like, it going too far in this instance. Like, toxic individualism is definitely a thing that pervades American politics especially, but politics everywhere else too. That politicians increasingly are just transparent about not believing in anything, which includes inoculating the population of this country against diseases that killed, like, millions in generations prior. Yeah, and then they will literally cry about it when you say, like, you're doing a shit ass job and somebody should replace you because people are dying, and they'll cry and whine about poor me. You don't hate these people enough. However much you think you hate these people, however much I hate these people, we do not hate them enough.
Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.